Hi, I'm Dan Fromer, founder and editor-in-chief of The New Consumer. This is Consumer Trends 2022 in collaboration with Coefficient Capital. I'm a longtime business and technology journalist, and I created The New Consumer to explore how and why people spend their time and money. The New Consumer is a new kind of media company supported entirely by members. Our community includes top founders, executives, and investors in consumer and tech. Join us today and get my exclusive members newsletter featuring original reporting, analysis, and commentary at newconsumer.com. Coefficient Capital is a venture capital firm that leads early growth investments in digitally powered consumer brands. Launched in 2018 by Franklin Isaacson and Andrew Galetka, the firm focuses on consumer businesses that leverage technology to create competitive advantages. What and how consumers are buying is changing, and that's leading to a new wave of innovative consumer brands built in both online and offline worlds. This is where Coefficient is exclusively focused. Find them at coefficientcap.com. The Consumer Trends Report, now in our second year, is our attempt to highlight what changed this year in the consumer world, including food and beverage, fitness and finance, and what we think will matter most in the years ahead. We again spent the past few months reviewing and analyzing data from dozens of first and third-party sources, including consumer spending data provided by Earnest Research. Special thanks. We also conducted our third original consumer trends survey in partnership with Toluna. In November and December, we polled more than 3,000 U.S. consumers across a variety of topics, focusing on how their habits and behaviors are changing. You can access the latest full version of this presentation, including more slides, at newconsumer.com/trends. I'll also be going into more detail about our research for subscribers of The New Consumer. Please become a member today. 2020 shocked the system. In 2021, we acclimated. As COVID-19 vaccines became widely available this past spring, many people started to move on with at least parts of their lives. Americans gradually resumed many consumer activities, according to Google's mobility tracker. That continued even as the Delta variant made its way through the U.S. in the late summer and fall. For most of November, retail and recreation mobility was down just about 6% from the pre-COVID baseline. E-commerce adoption, which rapidly accelerated in the early months of the pandemic, returned to its former growth curve as people returned to physical retail. A global supply chain and logistics crisis has been a big story this year, causing product shortages and delays and sharply rising shipping prices. Online advertising got more expensive, which continues to force e-commerce businesses to get more disciplined and creative with their growth tactics. Restaurant dining, as measured by OpenTable, is almost back to normal in the US. But attitudes around work have clearly changed. Office occupancy is only around 40% in the top 10 metros measured by Kastle, lower in New York, higher in Texas. In our latest survey, 88% of Americans say they believe they should have the right to work remotely if technology and the nature of their work permits it. This is consistent across many demographics we measure, including genders and income groups. Americans have quit their jobs at record rates in recent months, including more than 4 million each in July, August, and September, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. Turnover has been especially high in food service, arts and recreation, and retail. As the pandemic enters its third year, many aspects of life and consumer behavior have returned to normal, but uncertainty about what's next is still our reality. In October, about 2/3 of respondents to Cowen's Consumer Tracker survey said they believe COVID-19 will disrupt their life for more than 6 months. That's down a bit from September, but it's still a rate that significantly re-accelerated after the Delta variant made us realize this thing isn't over yet. And in late November, the World Health Organization named a new variant, Omicron, as a variant of concern. As we record, it's too early to tell what it will mean for the pandemic and the consumer. But in our survey in early December, more than 90% said they were aware of the variant. More than 20% said they had already scheduled or received a booster shot because of the variant's emergence. Some 15% said they had canceled a social obligation because of it. And 13% said they had canceled a personal trip or vacation because of it. For the past 2 years, the consumer has had to respond and acclimate to its system with unexpected new rules around socializing and human behavior, health and safety, work and school, and spending money in new and different ways. For this year's report, we wanted to focus on those consumers themselves, how they think, what they want, and where that might lead us. We're especially interested in the Gen Z and Millennial generations, which represent the consumer of the foreseeable future. These two groups, people between the ages of 10 and 40, represent about 40% of the US population, and they're entering their prime earning and spending decades. So consumer spending will increasingly be on their terms, not the baby boomers. These generations grew up with the internet, which is reflected in many of their responses to our Consumer Trends survey. One thing I'll note is that we only polled consumers ages 18 and older, so any sentiment that skews toward the younger half of Gen Z may not be fully represented here. More Gen Z consumers tell us they feel most like themselves online than offline. It's a roughly even split for millennials, and then it diverges heavily toward offline for Gen X and boomers. Younger consumers are also more likely to meet their closest friends online. More than a third of Gen Z and millennials told us they met their closest friends online, versus about 20% for Gen X and 5% for boomers. The majority of Gen Z and millennial consumers tell us they consider themselves a gamer. Increasingly, digital culture is culture. We're broadly interested in how consumers want to associate and interact with brands, and more generally, how they think about them. In our survey, almost 2/3 of consumers said they agree that brands should be about something more than profit. Still, more than half say they understand that brands must prioritize making a profit. More than 60% agree that brands have a responsibility to have a positive impact on the environment. And more than half agree that brands have a responsibility to make people's lives better. Millennials, the first generation that grew up with e-commerce and the internet, had especially strong feelings to our survey questions about brands. Some 55% agreed that they want to feel personally close to the brands they buy. More than half said they want brands they buy to speak to them like they're best friends, that they want brands that make them feel like they're part of a community, and that they care about the people behind the brand, not just the brand themselves. More than 40% of millennials said they won't buy from brands that don't take a stance on important social issues. Gen Z consumers also agreed with these ideas more strongly than older generations, but millennials responded uniquely. Younger consumers were generally more aware and approving of gender and sexuality-related concepts in our survey. About 1/3 of the Gen Z consumers we polled, and more than 30% of millennials, said they think gender is fluid. Older generations said so at lower rates, and more than half of boomers said they didn't understand the question. Americans are united. Almost half said that COVID-19 is the most important problem in the US right now. We asked our survey group to pick up to 3. Climate change and the environment came next, followed by high cost of living, bad government, and the healthcare system. Beyond those, younger consumers were more likely to pick the education system, unemployment, personal nutrition, and racial inequality, while older generations were more likely to pick illegal immigration, violent crime, and political divide. Let's talk more about the environment and sustainability. If you recall, one of the major winners of 2019 was the cardboard straw, which became a popular, if imperfect, symbol of progressive environmentalism. Consumers care about the environment. Broadly, 80% tell us they're willing to change their behavior for it. And corporations have increasingly made sustainability part of their narrative. This chart shows mentions of the word sustainability spiking this year on quarterly earnings calls, as tracked by Bloomberg. For consumers, looking at the most popular activities done for sustainability or environmental reasons, more than half of Americans told us they recycle, and other behaviors to resell and reuse are relatively common. Almost 20% of consumers say they compost, higher in rural areas than urban. Some of these behaviors are consistent by generation, but many are not. Gen Z and millennial consumers were much more likely to say they ate a plant-based diet for sustainability or environmental reasons. Also to drive an electric or hybrid car, or to rent items instead of buying them. Older generations were more likely to say they recycle or resell or donate their used clothes. What about making purchases? How does sustainability fit in there? We asked our survey group to rank their purchasing priorities across several categories. Most people did not choose sustainability as one of their top 3 priorities. In apparel, for example, the top priorities were price and value, product quality, and fit. In beverages, taste, price and value, and brand name. But some consumers did prioritize sustainability. About 23% chose it as a top 3 priority for cleaning supplies, 22% for baby food, 17% for beauty, and 14% for furniture. These are meaningful percentages in huge industries. Last year, we reported in depth about a massive shift underway in the trillion-a-year US grocery industry, how food and beverage spending was heading online because of the pandemic, and what that meant. Let's check in a year later. One major change is that Americans are once again spending more money on food away from home than at home, and restaurants and bars have seen business recover as they have reopened their dining rooms. Online grocery spending got a huge pandemic boost as it became essential infrastructure overnight. And according to Earnest Research, which tracks U.S. consumer spending, the online share of grocery spending has maintained most of its gains. In our latest consumer trends survey, over 40% again said they've shopped for groceries online more since the beginning of the pandemic. Some 60% say they prefer online grocery shopping compared to their previous behavior, consistent with our survey from mid-2021 and up from 45% this time last year. We care about this because people buy food and beverages online differently than they do offline. It's a different user interface and a different experience, and it means there are different models and potentially new winners. Over the past year, for example, Uber and DoorDash have started to push more into grocery delivery, and a growing number of direct-to-consumer food and beverage brands have launched. The latest phenomenon is the rise of ultra-fast grocery delivery services, which promise a curated selection of fresh food and pantry items delivered to your door in 10 to 15 minutes. Gorillas was founded in Berlin in 2020 and recently raised a funding round, reportedly around $1 billion, led by a strategic delivery hero. In New York, several services are now competing for early, fast delivery business, including Fridge No More, Gorillas, and now GoPuff. Another has already reportedly shut down. DoorDash is launching its own competing service, and Instacart is reportedly planning its own pilot. Our question, is this a brand or a feature? Is ultra-fast delivery enough of a differentiating moat and lucrative enough to create the next great grocery brands? Or will this simply become a feature that everyone offers where it makes sense? Either way, the grocery shopper of the future plans to spend an impressive amount online. In our survey, more than half of Gen Z and Millennial consumers say they plan to do 50% or more of their grocery shopping online over the next 12 months. Older consumers are also becoming more accustomed to buying food and beverages online. I'll again highlight this chart from Mercatus, which shows how the pandemic radically changed the trajectory of online grocery in the US. The firm still expects the e-commerce share of US grocery spending to double over the next 5 years, sending another $100 billion of annual spending online. We've also been tracking the digital and home fitness markets, which had a pandemic boom. Peloton, a big winner last year, recently sounded the warning bells, saying it's having a hard time predicting consumer demand for its bikes and treadmills. Customers have also been less engaged, although some of that is likely seasonal. According to Earnest Research, foot traffic to gyms is still down around 20% from pre-pandemic levels. That's better than it was in 2020, but it's still not a complete recovery. In our latest survey, 75% of consumers said they switched to exercising more often at home due to the pandemic. Among those, around 90% have stuck with it, and almost 2/3 say they prefer it over their previous fitness routine, consistent with our previous surveys. One jarring chart from last year's report showed Equinox gym customers moving a large portion of their fitness spending to Peloton and other home fitness businesses. A year later, Equinox customers are back to spending more than half of their fitness budget at Equinox, according to Earnest Research. But they're still spending more money at Peloton than they were before the pandemic. More than 10% of Equinox customers are also Peloton customers, according to Earnest data. But less than 1% of Peloton's customers are also Equinox customers. GameStop stock was arguably the meme of the year, but it also showed a wave of consumer interest in new financial tools and services like the trading app Robinhood. At the end of September, Robinhood had more than 22 million funded accounts, up almost 100% year over year. Crypto and decentralized finance, often now called Web3, built meaningful awareness this year, and it's getting gradually easier to use. It's not clear that it's the future of finance, digital distribution, organizational structure, or really anything, but it's not just going away and has become an interesting playground for experimentation. Worth your attention. If 2020 shocked the system and 2021 was a year of acclimation, we see 2022 as a year of opportunity. For one, it's an opportunity to build new products and services for a new consumer with new attitudes and different views. We've seen brands with millennial aesthetics and values flourish over the past decade. Now we're entering the golden era of Gen Z brands, focusing on inclusivity, blurring lines across genders, ditching old norms, and building community as true digital natives. Environmental sustainability is now a value that few businesses can ignore. When it comes to making purchases, sustainability is not the consumer behavior, but it's increasingly part of the consumer behavior. Design accordingly. Broadly, e-commerce as a share of total U.S. retail sales has stabilized as people resume shopping in stores. Still, it's important to note that $300 billion in annual spending has moved online in the past 2 years in the U.S. alone. The shift to online grocery has also stabilized, but we believe many shopping habits have permanently changed. This will justify further investment and drive future share shifts. Most people who have switched to online grocery shopping still prefer it, and most measurements overlook new forms of purchasing, such as direct-to-consumer, which have unbundled the grocery cart. Look for new models, maybe on-demand delivery, to drive the next phase of growth. The future of fitness still looks like a hybrid digital and gym combination. Most consumers want some gym access, but the vast majority plans to do at least half of their fitness routine at home over the next year. It'll be years before fitness clubs fully recover. One key question is whether a single company, Peloton, a gym brand, or something new, will own the hybrid subscription. Inflation stands to be a significant issue for the consumer in 2022 as both prices and costs rise. Actual inflation rates are only expected in the single digits, while some price increases could reach the low double digits. But perception is different. In our survey, 58% of consumers said they believe prices for everyday goods have increased a lot over the past 6 months. One take is that consumers will shift purchases toward private label and other cheaper brands. But it's also an opportunity for new commerce models such as rental services. We're also in the middle of an unresolved change in attitudes and structures around work. Again, in our survey, almost everyone believes they should have the right to work remotely. Turnover will continue, and with record job openings, most Americans think now's a good time to find a quality job, particularly higher earners. Before I wrap up, I'd love to thank the team at Coefficient Capital for again partnering with me and the new consumer on this report, especially Nadia Gavatzos, Arpan Ray, and Natalie Borowski for their collaboration, and Andrew and Franklin for their perspective. I'd also again like to thank Taluna and Earnest Research for their time and resources. And thanks to Garnish Studios for this video. Bigger picture, it's become clear that there won't be a simple, elegant end to the COVID-19 pandemic. We don't know if a new variant, whether Omicron or another, will dramatically change the picture the way the virus first did in early 2020. Many Americans have already moved on. Instead, another year of uncertainty awaits, with the consumer mostly back in control. Thank you for your time and attention.